and welcome to this video about Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. I'm going to explain the gameplay and what I like about it, and hopefully by the end of it you'll be interested enough that if you ever get a chance, you'll be able to play this one. I'm really a true fanboy of the adventure titles, and I'm super glad that they're so widely accessible. I know that the remakes are a little bit different than the original Dreamcast versions, so if you're a true diehard Dreamcast person, then I salute you, but that's just not how I grew up with them. I have always played the remakes because that was what was available to me, and I still had a great time with these games, so I will go on and explain the reasons, which are quite a few actually, why I think you should play these games, in this one specifically, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle Edition. I am going to try to avoid as many spoilers as possible so that you will still get a decent experience playing through the story of the game. However, I do need to show off a little bit of gameplay in order for you to see how each campaign plays and what it looks like. Today you see my ordinary blue hedgehog is joined by an equally ordinary black hedgehog, who presents as the main antagonist for this game. We'll talk about that hedgehog in a second, but for now let's focus on the main hedgehog, Sonic. Now, Sonic's gameplay in this game is fairly similar to how he plays in Sonic Adventure, but he has a few moves that work a little bit differently. For example, the light speed dash makes a return, but you don't have to charge it up this time. Instead, it's more of a button press and you go type of thing. But other than that, he retains most of his first moves pretty well. You also, with Sonic specifically, do unlock a bounce ability later on, and that can be handy in certain situations. And he can also do a somersault in this game, which you can use to break boxes and get under small gaps, which is pretty neat. And the most notable addition to this particular game is you have the ability to grind on rails, and you can speed up. As long as you stay balanced, you can grind pretty far, and if you go on a downward slope, you'll gain a lot of momentum, and that's just really cool. So it's really interesting for this particular game. There's a bit of product placement. Instead of Sonic's classic red and white shoes with the gold buckle, he's wearing soap shoes, which they try to claim will allow you to basically do this in real life, which I'm skeptical about that, to be honest, but it's a fun little mechanic. So, good gameplay for Sonic overall. Very similar to how he plays in the previous game, but with a little bit of extra stuff thrown in just to keep things interesting. I'm gonna let this footage play a little bit longer because there is actually one particular thing that you can do with these poles here that you can grab onto. If you can actually manage to pull it off, you can jump off of them whenever the red area is where Sonic is facing, and you'll get super high air. And it's good for getting to higher places. Sometimes you'll need to do it to cross gaps. It's really a very interesting mechanic, and I'm pretty sure this is the first time this one appears as well. And we'll probably just let this play out. We'll see the truck chase, which you may be familiar with if you've played Generations. This is the stage City Escape. This is the game that it's originally from, and it's honestly probably one of the better opening stages in any game, but Sonic games especially, just because it's super cool to me. And I played it once and I was like hooked on Sonic, and I'm like, this is the best thing ever. So here I'll show you the map. That's the major difference between the first game and the second one, which is you have a map instead of a hub area, and you can load into stages. Like here, you'll see I've loaded into Tails' stage, and Tails, unlike in the previous game, where he was flying around the stage, he's actually inside the tornado as an armored mech of sorts, and he has a laser guided missile, and he fires at enemies with it. You can lock on to multiple targets at once, and doing so generally nets you bonus points, and the more bonus points you can get, the better you'll score at the end of the stage. This is really the only gameplay mechanic for Tails. Unfortunately, you will not see him in a stage outside of this mechanic, so no flying as Tails, I'm afraid, in the actual stages. You'll see a little bit later there is another area where he does have his flight ability and isn't inside the tornado, but his gameplay is, I think, modeled after Gamma's gameplay from the previous game, which is probably one of my favorite playstyles we've seen from the series. And unlike Gamma, you don't have a time limit for these. You do, however, have a health bar. Instead of having to hold on to at least one ring to keep from dying when hit, you can lose your rings and it'll lower your health. And if your health gets too low, you can be killed by enemies. But gaining more health is pretty easy. You just collect rings and that refills your health gauge. Or sometimes you will see an item capsule that contains a health refill. So it's not that difficult to maintain a good amount of health. Some of the later stages are difficult, but for the most part, Tails is a pretty good playstyle. The third and final playstyle in the game is the treasure hunting playstyle. In the first campaign, this is taken on by Knuckles. It's very similar to the treasure hunting stages in the first game. The biggest difference is that the radar works a little bit differently. Unlike in the first game where the radar targeted all 3 shards at once, it now only targets one at a time. This doesn't stop you from collecting the other shards if you happen upon them while you're searching for the one it's targeting, but it may make it a little bit more difficult to find the shards if you're not used to it. I personally don't have a problem with the radar working this way. I think it's just fine. And the faster you find the shards, the more points you get. And if you collect a shard in under a minute, you get a perfect bonus, which is really cool. So now I feel like it's a good time to mention that there are actually 2 stories in this game, 2 story campaigns. The first one follows Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails, and the second one chronicles the story as viewed from the perspective of the villains. So this is actually the first and only game where you can play as Eggman, joined by newcomers Shadow and Rouge. Eggman's playstyle is the same as Tails. He's the mech shooter, and then Shadow plays nearly identical to Sonic. There is one move, the bounce, that Shadow doesn't get as an upgrade, but other than that, he plays almost exactly the same as Sonic. And then Rouge is the treasure hunting character for the Dark campaign. So you will have to complete both in order to beat the game. That about wraps up the gameplay stuff for the main stories. Now we're going to move on to the side modes. So, the Chao Garden does make a return in this game. It's got a lot more features than it did in Sonic Adventure or Sonic Adventure DX. And I'm sorry if I didn't do the best job explaining the Chao Garden in the first video, or if I seemed a little bit disengaged from it. It's simply I preferred the Sonic Adventure 2 battle version of the Chao Garden, and have made a lot more progress in that version than I have in the Sonic Adventure DX version. So, the key that you saw me collect that put the Chao icon on the screen takes you to this Chao world. Now, when you do this in story mode, you can go into one of the gardens, and after you exit the garden, you'll be lured back into the story. But if you enter the Chao Garden from the map in stage select mode, you can walk back out into the lobby and enter any of the other areas of the Chao world when you need to. So, much like in the original game, there are small animals that you can collect and give to your Chao. Each one gives them different abilities and physical features. You can also customize your Chao a little bit by having them wear different hats, which in Sonic Adventure DX, the animal that gives them this ability is, I think, the koala, but in this game, it's the skeleton dog thing. And another interesting feature about this animal is that it allows you to remove animal parts. You don't get to choose which ones get removed, but if you want your Chao to just have a normal body, you can give it skeleton dogs until the parts are removed. The bat also does this, but it can completely remove their legs and make them a ghost. And it's weird, they kind of still have a walking animation, but they float around like a ghost, and it's really cute. So, I would say the animals are a lot better in this game. I think I would have liked some of the ones from the original game to remake an appearance in here, but there are a lot more of them, I think, and they basically fall into different categories based on what type of ability they enhance, and they are color-coded as such. Now, animals will enhance some abilities, but take away from others. And in this game, you also have the Chaos Drives, which you get from the gun robots. And those can be given to a Chao and increase in ability without detracting from anything else. So now you'll see I've loaded into the Chao world as Shadow. The first garden I went into as Knuckles is the first garden that you'll unlock, but now you can see I've unlocked both the other gardens. This is the Dark Garden. The way this works is there is an alignment system for your Chao, and you affect which alignment the Chao follows by interacting with it with specific characters. If you interact with it with hero characters in a positive way, it will become more aligned with hero. If you interact with it with heroes in a negative way, like treating it poorly by throwing against a wall and stuff, then it will become a dark Chao. This will also make it so that it doesn't like the character that you abused it with, and vice versa. The characters that you treat the Chao well with, it will bond with them. And the opposite holds true for the dark characters. Treating them well as a dark character will make them become dark, and treating them poorly as a dark character will make them become hero. So once you've unlocked one of each type, you unlock all three gardens. And unique to this game, the hero Chao do poorly and actually lose happiness and health in the Dark Garden, and the Dark Chao will be the same way in the Hero Garden. I think the Neutral Garden is fair game for everybody, and Neutral Chow are not affected by the garden, and Baby Chow obviously can go anywhere. It just really depends on where you have them at the time. So I have a few Chow in here that I eventually want to evolve into Dark Chow. Some of them have already evolved into Neutral Chow, and I'll have to wait until they end up reincarnating. But this also brings me to their evolutions, which are vastly different depending on the ability type, and it's based on the last animal they interact with before they evolve. Now, here we are in the Chow Kindergarten. You'll see this fortune telling house. That is actually where you get to name your Chow. The fortune teller will give your Chow a name, or you can pick your own. The doctor is where you take it to learn its stats or if it gets sick. The principal's office has tips, and then this here, the classroom. You can leave them in there and they will learn a lesson. It's usually an instrument or something. Today it's apparently drawing, which is a fun one. You can have your child learn to draw and it will draw on the ground. And then this here is the Sonic Adventure 2 Battles version of the Black Market. It's fairly similar to the one in Sonic Adventure DX. The Hero and Dark fruits are a little bit different, and those actually do appear in Sonic Adventure DX. They just look different, and that's the only way you can get them to be Hero or Dark Chow in that game, because the characters don't really have an alignment system. And that's why I prefer this game. It's a lot easier to evolve your Chow. Here you're going to see I'm going to buy this hat because I want to put it on one of my Chow. Hats are good. You don't really get to choose what your Chow's face looks like, and if you don't like it, there's no way to change it without hacking the game. So basically, if you are playing a copy of the game that you don't have the means to hack or anything, you can just cover their face with a hat, and it still looks cute, and they look really nice in hats. I was going to show footage of going with this hat, but I think the footage cuts off right when I'm about to put the hat on the Chow, unfortunately. Now you can see I'm in the garden as Tails, or in the lobby rather, and this is the one place where he can fly, is in the Chow world. And he can fly pretty much indefinitely, so it's pretty fun. I think there are a few glitches you can achieve with Chow Gardens with Tails' flight ability. And this here is the Chow Stadium. We're going to look and see the Chow Karate, because the Chow race is essentially the same as the other game. So Chow Karate is pretty interesting. I'll show you one round. The rounds get harder as they go. I'm just going to pick a Chow here and go with the beginner level. And that's actually a lot lower than he can withstand. But it'll give me an excuse to talk about the mechanics of this particular feature. So essentially, once you've picked a Chow and a difficulty level, there are 5 rounds, each with a slightly more advanced opponent. The ones in this beginner route are actually not able to walk yet, most of them, so they're crawling, and that's actually a very unfair disadvantage that I didn't mean to use. But anyways, basically your Chow will more or less attack its opponent, and each Chow has a health bar, and if your Chow either runs out of health or falls off of the arena, then the round is over and the other Chow has won. So you'll see, I think I actually played this and the other Chow ended up falling off of the arena, so even though I'm doing a lot of damage to him, it doesn't even matter, because, you know, the Chow fell off the arena. And you don't control your Chow does this on its own, and you can cheer them on to increase their zeal. Zeal is kind of interesting. if your Chow runs out of zeal, it will sit on the ground and do basically nothing until you cheer it on and refill the zeal meter. The other Chow that you're facing can also lose zeal, and once it loses zeal, it basically just sits there and does nothing as well. So that's pretty much the basics of this little mode for the Chow Karate. I'm not going to show the rest of this, so let's just move on to the 2-player mode. Here you can see the different characters you can play as for the 2-player mode. You can play as Tails, Eggman. There's a couple of Chows and Walkers that you can play, and all of those are for the shooting battles. Then you've got Knuckles and Rouge and Chaos and Tikal for the treasure hunting battles, and then you've got speed battles, which can be done by Amy, Metal Sonic, Sonic, and Shadow. And then most of the characters can be in this kart racing mode. The kart racing is interesting to say the least. There are actually 2 different stages that use this track as their stage, and it's like you're in a car driving, and they are probably one of my least favorite parts of the game. I never look forward to them on subsequent playthroughs. It's just the mechanics aren't great, and there's no real way to drift, and taking corners is hard. You run into walls. One of them actually has places where you can go off of the track, which is really tough. There are multiple missions for each stage, and that includes these. And one of the missions is to avoid hitting walls, and I think for that very reason, I would never be able to 100% complete this game. I mean, I can't make A rank on most of the missions anyway, so that would also be a barrier. But, you know, just that alone stops me from getting anywhere with that. And one thing I like about Sonic games is, for me personally at least, you don't have to be like 100% awesome at them to enjoy them. And I feel like you have to be a lot better at the classics to really get a feel for how they work and what they have to offer. But like, some of the earlier 3D titles are a lot more forgiving. I feel like this particular game really knocks it out of the park in terms of gameplay. And, you know, one little side mode or stage that isn't quite up to par with the rest of them isn't going to deter me from liking the game. So, you know, just keeping a positive attitude. The last mode for single player is a boss rush. And then right here I'm showing you this stage because I want to show you there's a lot of parallels between some of the stages. Like, this stage for Shadow is a lot like City Escape in a way, but also very different. I think this was the stage that appeared in the original demo, the City Escape, and then this one, a version of City Escape at least, and this one. So, you know, these are some really strong stages. I also want to show you that Eggman's stage, Iron Gate, is very similar to Tails' stage that I showed earlier, but I do want to stress that even though stages might take place in similar locations, have similar theming, you very rarely play as a character with the same playstyle in a particular stage. And there are stages that do have parallels between the campaigns, sure, but unlike Sonic Adventure DX or the original, you don't go through any of these stages as a different character because, you know, each campaign has its own set of stages. So if the repetitiveness of returning to stages as different characters wasn't your thing in that game, then maybe this one will spice it up a little bit for you. One last tidbit, and really the main reason I showed this footage in the first place, is because you can actually find Big the Cat in, I think, all of the stages. He's just chilling somewhere, waiting to be found. You can see him on the wall there as I die. But, you know, he is here even though he's not playable, and I think that's kind of interesting. It's funny, in the GameCube version of the game, he's replaced with a ring. Most of the time it's unobtainable, and I don't know why they did that, but a lot of these big cameos are really funny, and it's always fun to kind of watch out for them. So I hope that kind of might make you smile even if you don't like Big. So if you can find room in your heart for these ordinary hedgehogs, I would highly suggest trying this game. It gets a 10 on 10 from me. That about wraps it up. Thanks for watching.